towards resolving this long-standing border issues. NSA Ajit Doval, he is in Beijing for this high-level meeting with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, and the visit follows recent positive developments in India-China relations, especially after the easing of tensions along the line of actual control in eastern Ladakh. The upcoming special representative SR-level talks is what they're calling it. The first such meeting after 5 years aims to resolve the border disputes that have been a source of friction between the two countries for decades. Now, the timing of Doval's visit follows a gradual improvement in the bilateral ties as well, particularly since the Galwan 2020 clash, which led to heightened military standoffs between India and Chinese forces. But then again, one notable development was the disengagement agreement on the LAC, announced after a meeting between Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping at the BRICS summit, which took place in Russia. And given the history of the border tensions dating back to the 1962 conflict, this special representative talks, they aim to build a deeper understanding of the issues at hand and explore avenues for peaceful resolution. While there is no official confirmation yet on the exact agenda of the talks, sources suggest that the discussions will cover a range of sensitive issues. Additionally, the meeting could potentially lead to further military-to-military discussions to ensure the proper implementation of any agreements that have been made. And with China's increasing geopolitical tensions with the United States over the issues like Taiwan and the Philippines, Beijing has shown a renewed interest in stabilizing its relationships with India. Joining me on the broadcast is Professor Swaran Singh at the Center for International Politics, JNU. Very warm welcome to you, Professor. Professor, first and foremost, 5 years later, Wang Yi and Ajit Doval face to face. This is after sweets were exchanged during the disengagement process amidst the Diwali. We've seen Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi sit across the table at the BRICS summit as well. Things certainly, at least in terms of optics, looking quite happy. 5 years later, Wang Yi, Ajit Doval face to face. What are you expecting? What are those sensitive issues that need to be highlighted?
First of all, Kavir, if you look at the hectic pace of senior level interactions, this is definitely way beyond just optics. And the mood is very clear. From October 21st, the last agreement on Demchok and Depsang in terms of patrolling and demilitarization. The immediate, within 2 days, meeting of two national leaders in Kazan, then December 5th, delegation level meeting of two foreign ministers in Rio de Janeiro, then followed by the working group meeting on consultation and coordination on border affairs between two ministries in Delhi, which was the 32nd round of dialogue, and now the senior level special representatives. I think it's an impressive pace of very high level and dedicated conversations, which has also been able to showcase what is the agenda that they have had. Very clearly, there's quite a number of issues on the table. But now we have this special representatives meeting, which is the senior most level two functionaries from India and China sitting together. And this mechanism was built primarily to ensure or manage is the new language now, peace and tranquility on the border, and seek some kind of confidence building and finally resolution. So therefore, I think we are a kind of full circle with the special representatives coming back and having a conversation. The two, of course, had met in St. Petersburg as part of BRICS National Security Advisors meeting, but that was not special representatives format at that time. Now the conversation in Beijing is clearly focused on border, the issues that we are already hearing. I think from the Indian side, the focus remains much more border centric. You remember, we have always said relations cannot be normal as long as borders are not normal. So therefore, India is not just ensuring, understanding on patrolling on the line of actual control and de-escalation to take it forward, but also at the same time, India today is talking of restarting the pilgrimage to Mansarovar and Kailash, and also revival of sharing of hydrological data on the Sangpo Brahmaputra River. Chinese apparently have always said that one issue should not be made to hold hostage entire relationship. So their spectrum of priorities is slightly broad-based. They want to ensure that visa regimes are relaxed for general Chinese. Journalists are allowed to come to India. All the flights are sort of revived. We used to have direct connection to 5 Chinese cities. So Slightly, I think the focus of priority is different, but I think overall mood is very upswing in that sense of
Okay,
taking relations
Professor. Well, if you are
forward.
saying the mood is upswing, and given the disengagement at LAC, what are some of the biggest challenges between these two countries at the moment?
I think challenges are very clear because these two nations over last 30 years or so had evolved about a dozen MOUs, agreements, and mechanisms of all kinds to ensure peace and tranquility on the border. Likewise, had also created a range of mechanisms from the flag level meetings on the border to all the way to senior special representatives level meetings. So the kind of arrangements are in place. What, of course, China and India have transformed in last 30 years very rapidly. So in all sectors, there is a transformation, including, for example, on the frontiers of China and India in that sense, which makes mobility much more easier. So both sides, and I would say Chinese particularly, are able to bring forward much heavier equipment, quasi-permanent structures, large number of soldiers, much faster forward, which has resulted in simply what we call ingressions or incursions annually going up from about 80, 90 to nearly 200 by the time President Xi Jinping came to power. And in last 10 years, we have seen it going all the way to 600. So more incursions, more encounters, more face-offs create new, set of anxieties. And therefore, as Foreign Minister has said many times, we need to restart a new set of confidence building measures because China and India are no longer the same as we were in 1990. So I think that is the new approach now to, again,
This
how
new
to find
approach,
new
Professor,
ways
that
to
you talk
ensure.
about, this new approach, this new prism with which China now needs to look at India. I remember at that meeting in Kazan as well, Xi Jinping used the words voice of the global south, something that the Prime Minister coined himself, at the G20 meet here at the Bharat Mandapam in India, in New Delhi. Now, in the last 30 years that you're talking about as well, how important is it that one understands how China views India's current position in the geopolitics, let alone the global south, but on the entire world stage? Do you think there's a problem over there with what China shows in terms of its visible teeth and teeth that are hidden?
There is no doubt, Kavit, China has much larger GDP, as we all know, 5 to 6 times. It has a very large, expensive Belt and Road Initiative, so it has its own set of leverages. But India has the enormous advantage of great acceptability around the world. The kind of engagement that the world, particularly great powers like European nations, United States, and emerging powers, and of course now the global south, the way India is engaged around the world brings enormous goodwill to India in that sense. And I think Chinese very clearly over a period of time begin to recognize that India may not be comparable to being the largest trading nation as China is, or having about nearly $2 trillion of investments that China now has in about 150 countries, but India's approach, India's engagement, the way India is welcome. For example, look at Indian Prime Minister visiting whether the Western Pacific Islands. You remember his visit to Papua New Guinea. More recently, his visit, for example, to the Caribbean. Guyana was another example. So the way Indian leadership is able to engage with many of these countries and emerging as a voice of global South is being recognized by Chinese. So China and India are no longer the same, I'm saying, as they were in 1990s when they conceptualized how to maintain peace and tranquility on the border. And now they are very different countries in that sense, and both recognize the change, except that they have to gear up and set up new mechanisms, new ways, new mannerisms of dealing with each other. And I think here is a quick example. If you look at the immediate kind of concern the Chinese have, is the fact that President Donald Trump, after he takes over power in White House on 20th of January, his first foreign visit is likely to be to India because India is going to host Quad, and President Donald Trump will be coming to attend the Quad summit. And Chinese are trying to make sure that they can resolve things with India possibly before that visit takes place. Maybe
US
ideally
influence and
ensure
US
that.
pressure is certainly something, Professor, that one will, of course, have to look at. And that's again a pertinent point that you've raised, that the Quad Summit is going to be hosted by India next, and America, a great partner on that particular front. Donald Trump will have to make his way here. And every time a US president is in the Indo Pacific, I know things aren't really calm in Beijing. But new optics, new enthusiasm, you're talking about a new slate to begin with. But then again, how will this hold ground in front of old habits, old players, and old ways between these two countries? Well, we'll have to wait and find out. Professor Swaran Singh, many thanks for joining with us and helping us out with your insightful inputs on this point.